The hallway lights were soft and low when Eleanor Griffin opened her eyes. At first, everything was blurry, shapes, voices, sounds. Her body felt heavy, pinned to the bed, like someone had filled her with stones. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her mouth wouldn't move. Her fingers wouldn't lift. Panic struck her heart. But then, a gentle voice cut through the fog. "You're in the ICU, Ms. Griffin. You had a stroke, but you're stable now." The nurse's voice was calm, soft, and practiced. Eleanor blinked. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. But her eyes, they could still tell stories. And her mind, her sharp, calculating mind, was still working. She was 72 years old. A widow. A retired accountant. A mother. And at this very moment, a prisoner inside her own body. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part hadn't happened yet. Just 48 hours earlier, she had been at home, alone, making tea. Her cat, Willow, was curled near the fireplace. Outside, it was snowing lightly. Eleanor always loved quiet mornings. A book. A warm mug. Her husband Richard's old flannel blanket across her lap. Her son, Daniel, hadn't called in days. Not that she expected him to. Ever since he married Vanessa, things had changed. Drastically. Vanessa was sharp. Charming. Beautiful in the way magazines sold beauty. Perfect makeup, gold necklaces, and a laugh that felt just a little too rehearsed. From the beginning, Eleanor had tried to welcome her. She gave them the master bedroom upstairs. Cooked for them. Let them use her car. She even added Daniel as a joint signer on her bank account, after Vanessa mentioned, "Just in case anything happens to you, Eleanor." Eleanor hadn't trusted her. But she trusted her son. At least she used to. Then came the small signs. A missing checkbook. A suspicious charge labeled crypto coaching. A conversation she overheard. "Vanessa, she's sitting on money she doesn't even use." "Daniel, she's just old-fashioned. I don't want to fight her." "Vanessa, we could do so much more with it." Eleanor never said anything. She just watched. She made a decision that week. If they ever tried to take what wasn't theirs, she needed to be ready. So quietly, she went to her attorney, Charles Monroe, and asked for help. "I want to protect myself," she said. "From what?" he asked gently. "From the people who smile at me while planning their escape." She moved the majority of her savings, over $800,000, into a private, locked trust that could only be accessed through her signature and Charles's. She left $360,000 in the original joint account. It looked like her full savings. She made sure of it. The trap was set, and she told no one. Then came the stroke. Eleanor collapsed in her kitchen. The teacup shattered. Willow meowed desperately. Paramedics came quickly. She was conscious but unable to speak. At the hospital, they moved her to the ICU. They ran tests, hooked her to machines, and slowly, painfully, her mind adjusted to the new silence inside her body. Her first visitor? Not Daniel. Not Vanessa. Just a nurse, offering water through a straw. The second day passed. No calls. No flowers. No messages from her only son. Until the nurse came in with her phone. "Looks like your son finally texted you," she said with a soft smile. "Want me to read it out loud?" Eleanor blinked slowly, her way of saying yes. The nurse opened the phone and read the message aloud. She paused, frowned, and slowly her tone changed. "We took everything. You'll be fine. Enjoy your retirement. We're off to Spain." There was silence in the room. Heavy. Crushing. The nurse's smile dropped. Is this some kind of joke?" she asked softly. Eleanor didn't move. She couldn't move. Her heart pounded inside her chest. It wasn't a joke. It was betrayal. Complete. Final. Without shame. They had taken her money. They had left the country. And they sent a message, not of concern, not of fear, but of victory. Like it was a game. Like she didn't matter anymore. But what Vanessa and Daniel didn't know was that they had taken the wrong money. The decoy account, the one she had made look like her entire savings, had been cleaned out. Gone. But her real money? Her real legacy? It was safe. Because she had seen them coming. Because she had planned for this exact betrayal. And now, they were walking into her trap. Flashback, 2 months earlier. Eleanor sat across from Charles Monroe in a quiet office. He had known her for decades. "They're not hurting me yet," she said. "Then why prepare like this?" he asked. "Because they might not wait until I'm gone. They might wait until I'm too weak to fight." Charles nodded. "And if something does happen?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "Then they'll think they won. But they'll be wrong. She left instructions. If anything suspicious happened while she was in medical care, account freezes. Legal notices. International watch lists. All ready with one signed release. Eleanor might have been old, but she wasn't stupid. And she wasn't soft. That night in the ICU, Eleanor stared at the ceiling. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. But inside her chest burned something cold and clean. They thought they'd silenced her. But they had only triggered her plan. And soon they'd realize. She hadn't given up. She'd just been waiting. The night felt long inside the ICU. Machines beeped softly. A nurse checked Eleanor's chart. Another adjusted the 4-drip. Outside, it was snowing again. Quiet. Peaceful. But inside Eleanor, something had shifted. Daniel's text had ended more than a relationship. It had ended the part of her that believed he could still change. His words weren't careless. They were cold. He knew exactly what he was doing. And so did Vanessa. They had waited until her body gave out. Until she couldn't speak. Until she couldn't fight back. But what they didn't know was that Eleanor had never stopped preparing. Meanwhile, in Madrid, the airport was crowded. People rushed through security, dragging luggage, checking phones. Daniel and Vanessa stood in the immigration line, looking calm but excited. "You really think she won't wake up?" Vanessa whispered. Daniel shrugged. "She's 72. Stroke patients don't bounce back, Vanessa. And even if she does, what's she going to do? Chase us across Europe with a walker?" They both laughed. They didn't know that Eleanor had already chased them, without moving a step. They didn't know that the moment they withdrew the last dollar from her decoy account, a silent alert had triggered. Charles Monroe got the notification, and he was already 2 steps ahead. In New York, Charles sat in his office that same morning. His phone buzzed. He picked it up, read the banking alert, and smiled faintly. The subject line was simple. Full withdrawal alert, decoy account 002. He opened the drawer, pulled out a sealed folder marked Emergency Protocol, Financial Abuse, Eleanor Griffin, and made a single phone call. "Activate everything," he said calmly. "The account has been emptied." The process was swift and clean. Charles had spent his life working with families, and he had seen this happen too many times. Children turning on their parents when they thought the time was right. But this time, the mother had been ready. Within the hour, Eleanor's real trust account was secured with extra encryption. The joint account was flagged and locked under suspected elder abuse. The passport control database received notice of financial investigation. A case file was opened with the U.S. Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. An alert was sent to Interpol. Daniel and Vanessa had no idea. They checked into a luxury hotel in Madrid that afternoon. Vanessa posted a photo on Instagram. Camera with flash freedom. Finally, wineglass airplane, #SpainLife, #StartFresh. They went out for dinner that night. Expensive wine. Steak. Shopping. Vanessa spent freely, buying designer bags. Daniel kept refreshing the bank app, smiling as he saw their balance. $362,000. What he didn't see was that the account had been frozen an hour earlier. And what they didn't know was that the next morning, the world would start closing at 9:43 a.m. Vanessa tried to buy shoes at a luxury boutique. Her card was declined. She frowned, tried again. Declined. She called Daniel. "What's going on with the card?" "It worked yesterday." Daniel logged into the banking app. An error message flashed. "Access denied. Fraud review in progress." "It's probably just a glitch," he said, trying to sound confident. "It'll be fine." But it wasn't. An hour later, the hotel front desk called their room. "Mr. Griffin, can you please come downstairs? There's an issue with your payment method." Daniel went down, annoyed. The manager was waiting. He didn't look friendly. "Your card has been declined. We've also received notice from local authorities that this card is under investigation." Daniel's mouth went dry. That can't be right. I'm afraid we're going to need you to settle the balance in cash immediately." Daniel called Vanessa in a panic. "We need to go. Now." Vanessa snapped. "What do you mean go? We haven't done anything wrong. Something's happening. Something Eleanor did. I think she set us up." Eleanor lay still. She couldn't speak. Could barely move. Daniel and Vanessa tried to flee. They packed their things, argued in the hotel room, and rushed to the airport. But when they handed over their passports at the check-in counter, the agent's smile faltered. A red icon appeared on the screen. She tapped something, then looked up and said politely, "1 moment, please." Within minutes, 2 plainclothes Spanish officers approached. Daniel Griffin? Yes. You've been flagged in an open case related to international financial exploitation. Vanessa stepped back. This is insane. We didn't do anything wrong. That money was a gift. The officer raised an eyebrow. From a woman recovering in ICU, unable to speak? They were escorted to a side room. No screaming. No escape. Just silence, the kind Eleanor knew well. At the airport holding room, Daniel sat with his head in his hands. Everything was gone. Vanessa refused to speak to him. She was texting furiously, possibly trying to reach a lawyer or anyone who would believe her. But Daniel knew. He knew what had happened. His mother had known. She had prepared. And now he had nothing. And worst of all, he had no one. The next morning, Eleanor was sitting up slightly in bed. Her fingers had started to twitch. Her speech was still limited, but her strength was returning, slow and steady. The nurse walked in with a small smile. Good news, Ms. Griffin. Your son's coming back home. Eleanor didn't react. He was stopped in Madrid. The embassy confirmed he's being returned for questioning. Still, she didn't react. She just closed her eyes and exhaled softly. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't even bitter. She was free. The plan had worked. And the people who had waited for her to fall had fallen themselves. But her mind was alive. Charles visited that afternoon, sitting by her bed. He didn't smile, but his voice was gentle. They're in Spain. The funds were frozen last night. Spanish authorities have been notified. They won't get far. Eleanor blinked slowly. One blink for yes, just as they'd practiced. Interpol will likely detain them at the airport or the hotel. I've submitted the emergency legal documents you signed in advance. Everything is going exactly the way you wanted it to. She blinked again. Slower. Steadier. For the first time since her stroke, she allowed herself to feel a little peace. The airport was quiet when Daniel stepped off the plane. No family waiting. No welcome home. Just a pair of U.S. Marshals and a silent ride in a black government car. His hands were trembling. The handcuffs didn't hurt, not physically. But what hurt was knowing why they were there. His mother had done this. Not with anger, not with yelling, but with calm preparation. She didn't scream or call the police. She simply set a trap, and he walked right into it. They took him straight to a federal processing center. No prison cell yet, but plenty of cold rooms, forms, and questioning. They asked about financial abuse, about withdrawals, about Vanessa. He gave them names. He tried to look sorry, but inside he was crumbling, because the truth was sinking in. The money was never his. And now, neither was his mother's trust. Eleanor sat up in her bed, her spine a little straighter. Her fingers had begun to respond again. Her voice was still faint, broken into syllables, but she could speak. Not full conversations, but enough. The nurses were amazed. Her recovery was stronger than expected. She didn't mention Daniel. She didn't ask if he had arrived. But she already knew. Charles Monroe came in that morning with a file. He's here, he said softly. Eleanor looked at him. Her eyes didn't show victory, just quiet resolve. He sat beside her. The bank is pressing charges. The feds are involved now. But the judge wants to hear from you before the case moves forward. She nodded slowly. Write it down, she whispered. He handed her a pen. Her hands shook as she wrote. It wasn't long, just a few lines. But they were powerful enough to carry the weight of everything she had held in for years. 3 days later, Daniel stood inside the courtroom. No suit, no tie, just a gray shirt, nervous hands, and 1,000 regrets. He looked thinner, pale, like the silence of his actions had finally caught up with him. Across the room, Eleanor was wheeled in. Her nurse stayed beside her. Charles Monroe walked ahead, holding the envelope with her written statement. Daniel looked up. She didn't look at him. She never did. The judge called the hearing to order. No trial yet, just the first appearance. A moment to decide how the case would be handled. Charles stepped forward. Your Honor, Ms. Griffin cannot speak for long periods. But she has prepared a statement. He opened the paper and read. To the court, I am not seeking revenge. I am not looking for sympathy. I am simply confirming that what was taken from me was not just money. It was trust. It was blood. It was the final thread I had with the child I raised. Daniel lowered his head. Charles continued. He waited until I couldn't speak. But I had already spoken, in my planning, in my silence, and in my will. I forgive him as a human being. But as my son, I am done. Gasps echoed in the room. Daniel looked up. His eyes met hers. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just sat there, steady, quiet, unshaken. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Your statement is noted. We will move forward with the charges and restitution order." Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. What could he say? He didn't just steal money. He stole dignity. And now it was being returned, just not to him. Later that day, Eleanor returned to her hospital room. The nurse adjusted her pillows. Charles sat with her a while, going over papers. She didn't talk much. But just before he left, she looked up and asked softly, "He really looked at me?" Charles nodded. Yes, like he understood. For the first time, Eleanor closed her eyes. She wasn't happy, but she felt clear. She hadn't wanted him in jail. She just wanted the truth to matter again. Daniel sat in a holding room, head in his hands. Vanessa hadn't answered any of his messages. He had no access to funds, no apartment, no job, just memories of a selfish decision made in a moment of weakness, thinking his mother would never notice, never wake up. But she did, and she didn't raise her voice. She raised herself. And now he had to live with that. 2 weeks later, Daniel was released on bail. He had to stay in a halfway house, do community service, and wear an ankle monitor. He applied for work at warehouses, shipping docks, anywhere that would take him. Every night he sat by a payphone. One evening he dialed his mother's number. Her voicemail played. "This is Eleanor Griffin. Please leave a message." He stood there, silent. Then he spoke. "Mom, I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I want you to know you were right. About everything. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if it can be fixed. But I'm sorry, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to prove that." He hung up. He didn't expect a reply. He just needed to say it. Eleanor sat near her window. The spring sun poured through the curtains. Willow, her cat, rested in her lap. She didn't check her messages. But something inside her, something deep, softened. Not forgiveness. But maybe release. She had won. Not with lawyers. Not with anger. But with strength and silence. Spring had arrived. The snow was gone now. The flowers in Eleanor Griffin's garden had started blooming again. Daffodils, crocuses, and early tulips pushing their way through the soil. It had been 4 months since her stroke. 3 months since Daniel had emptied the decoy account. 2 months since the court hearing. And 23 days since she had returned home. Her steps were slow, but she walked again. Her voice still cracked when she spoke too long, but she could speak. She had fought for her life, quietly, without anyone cheering her on. And now she was rebuilding it. Not in grand gestures, but in quiet choices. And one of those choices was to move on. The house felt different now. The walls felt quieter. Daniel's room was locked. Vanessa's perfume no longer lingered in the hallway. The guest room where they used to sleep together had been stripped clean, bedding washed, drawers emptied. Eleanor had donated all of Vanessa's designer shoes and handbags to a women's shelter. She didn't do it out of spite. She did it because those things meant nothing now. They were just reminders of people who saw her as a wallet, not a mother. The cat, Willow, followed Eleanor from room to room, never letting her out of sight. She had been through it all with her, from silent nights in the ICU to afternoons reading mail on the couch. Now, Eleanor sat in her favorite armchair with a blanket over her legs and a pen in her hand. She wasn't writing a will. She was rewriting her future. She didn't want Daniel's name on anything anymore. Not her trust, not her house, not her estate. Instead, she had spent the last week getting to know someone else. Her name was Carla, a nurse from the ICU who had cared for Eleanor during her quietest, most vulnerable days. When Eleanor had no voice, Carla had read her books aloud. When her arms couldn't move, Carla brushed her hair. When no one else came to visit, Carla sat with her on lunch breaks and told her about her 2 children. Eleanor had watched her kindness. Not the kind that asks for anything, but the kind that gives even when no one's looking. And so Eleanor did something she had never imagined she'd do. She invited Carla to her home for tea. They sat in the kitchen, the same one where Eleanor had collapsed months before, and laughed like they had known each other for years. Carla cried when Eleanor told her she had decided to leave part of her estate to her family. "You don't have to do this," Carla whispered. Eleanor simply replied, "I know. That's exactly why I'm doing it." Daniel's life was very different now. He lived in a shared halfway house with 3 other men. He worked the early shift at a warehouse, unloading trucks, stacking boxes, cleaning bays. It paid minimum wage. No benefits. No promises. But for the first time in his life, he didn't lie about it. He showed up on time. He didn't cut corners. And at night, he called his mom's number again. She never answered, but he left voicemails anyway. I got promoted to shift supervisor today. I found an apartment. Nothing fancy. But it's mine. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know. I'm still trying. He never said her name. Just Mom. And that alone was progress. Eleanor still listened. She never deleted his messages. She didn't cry when she heard them. She didn't pick up the phone or call him back. But she listened. Sometimes twice. She didn't do it to reopen old wounds. She did it to remind herself that growth doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it just comes in quiet echoes. And Eleanor had learned to live in quiet long ago. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from the Foundation for Financial Abuse Recovery, the organization Eleanor had quietly donated to a few weeks earlier. They thanked her for her generosity, for her story, and for giving other elderly survivors the courage to come forward. Her donation had already helped 3 seniors recover stolen funds. Eleanor sat by the window and read the letter twice. She didn't feel proud. She felt peace, because everything Daniel and Vanessa tried to take had become something greater. That Sunday, Eleanor took a small box into the backyard. Inside were the last remnants of Daniel's childhood. A baby blanket, a toy truck, a drawing he made in 2nd grade that said, "My mom is the strongest person I know." She sat by the garden, held the drawing, then quietly buried it beneath the cherry blossom tree Richard had planted when Daniel was born. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She was letting go. Not of love. That would always live somewhere inside her. But of the weight she had carried, the pain, the betrayal, the question of why. Because now she had an answer. Some people lose their way, and others never find it. But either way, you don't have to follow them. You can keep walking. A few weeks later, Daniel called one last time. "Hey, Mom. I won't keep calling. I know I don't deserve your voice. But I wanted you to know that I've started taking night classes. Business management. It's slow. I'm tired all the time. But I think I'm finally learning what it means to build something. To respect something." He paused. "You were never the weak one. I was. And if I ever become someone you can be proud of again, I'll wait, even if I never hear from you." He hung up. And that was the last message he ever left. 1 year later, Eleanor stood in her garden again. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom. She wore her husband's old coat, a scarf around her neck, and soft gloves on her hands. Carla stood beside her, holding a tray of tea. Eleanor looked out at the blossoms and whispered, "It's beautiful again." Carla smiled. "It is." Eleanor raised her cup and smiled, not for what she had lost, but for what she still had. She had peace. She had purpose. And she had survived. Not by fighting louder. Not by screaming. But by watching, waiting, and staying ready. Because sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stay silent and win anyway.